The rain had turned bitter by the time Riley stepped into the crosswalk, clutching a small, worn box to her chest. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her socks soaked through her sneakers, but she didn't seem to notice. A man sat beneath the underpass, barely a silhouette against the concrete gloom. He didn't look up when she approached. Riley knelt before him, opened the box, and gently lifted out a pair of work boots, still laced with the smell of her father. "These were his," she said softly, her voice shaking from more than just the cold. "But I think you need them now." The man didn't speak. His hand trembled as he reached for the boots that would soon set off a chain reaction neither of them could possibly imagine. Because tomorrow morning, that same man would walk into Boston Memorial Hospital in a $1,000 suit, and call her mother by name. Melissa Morgan didn't recognize the man waiting in the boardroom, not at first. He looked nothing like the fragile figure her daughter had offered a pair of old boots to just days ago. His tailored charcoal suit molded perfectly to his lean frame, his hair neatly combed, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, but oddly familiar, studied her with a kind of quiet gravity. He stood when she entered. "Ms. Morgan. Thank you for coming." The room felt too still, too pristine. Melissa smoothed the wrinkles in her scrubs, still damp from the drizzle outside. Her eyes flicked to the sleek Blackwood Technologies logo engraved behind him. This was that Ethan Blackwood. The Ethan Blackwood. Billionaire. Elusive. Impossible. "I'm sorry," she said carefully, "I thought this meeting was about hospital restructuring." "It is," he replied. "But also not." He gestured to the chair opposite his. On the table sat a folder, pristine white with her name typed on a label. Beside it, carefully placed, were the work boots Riley had given him. Melissa's breath caught. "I've been searching for something for a long time," he began, "and I didn't realize how lost I was until your daughter reminded me." He didn't elaborate, only watched her reaction. "Those boots," he continued, voice softer now, "were the first real gift I've received in over a decade. Not a transaction. Not a favor. A gift." Melissa's heart pounded. She remembered Riley wrapping them the night before, the way her hands lingered on the leather, the whispered prayer she offered before taping the newspaper shut. "Dad always said everyone deserves warm feet." Ethan sat down, but he seemed uneasy, as if the weight of the moment pressed harder than the tailored suit allowed. "There's a proposal in that folder," he said. "A full academic scholarship for Riley. Westbrook Academy. One of the best in the state. And a new role for you here, pediatric care director. Triple your current salary." Melissa stared. Her fingers trembled just brushing the edge of the folder. "Why?" His eyes dropped for a second. "Because she saw me," he said, simply. "When no one else did." The silence between them swelled, like a tide rising too fast. "But you were pretending," Melissa said at last, her voice tinged with accusation. "You weren't homeless. You were doing, what? An experiment?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I needed to remember what the world feels like when you're not insulated by wealth. I've done it before, but Riley, she changed something." He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. She was a pediatric oncologist. We were building a foundation for children like Riley. I shelved it after she passed. Buried it under acquisitions and meetings. But your daughter's kindness made me realize, maybe the project didn't need money. Maybe it needed heart." Melissa swallowed hard. This was too much. Too fast. "Ms. Morgan," Ethan said, gently, "I know how this looks. I know what people will assume. But this isn't charity. It's a promise. One your daughter reminded me to keep." She rose slowly from her chair, hands clenched. "Do you think giving us a scholarship and a job will erase the fact that you were hiding? That you watched my daughter, without telling us who you were?" "No," he said, quietly. But it's a start. Melissa turned toward the door, her pulse echoing in her ears. She paused just as her hand touched the handle. Do you think he would have approved? Ethan asked behind her. Your husband. She froze. Then looked back, her expression unreadable. Thomas believed in second chances. But he also believed in transparency. Then she left. As the door clicked shut behind her, Ethan exhaled for the first time in minutes. He turned to the boots still sitting on the table. They looked out of place in this world of polished marble and power suits. But maybe that was the point. 3 days before that meeting, Riley Morgan stood with her nose pressed to the fogged-up window of the public library. Her fingers traced little circles in the condensation as she waited for her mother to finish checking out a worn-out book on pediatric nutrition. Outside, the wind cut through Boston streets like a blade, slicing past the buildings and rattling the scaffolding. Riley's eyes fixed on a figure under the overpass. Same place, same man, same stillness. He was there again. Day 3. Mom, she said, tugging Melissa's coat as they stepped out into the cold. He's still there. Melissa followed her daughter's gaze. The man huddled beneath the bridge wore the same tattered coat and broken shoes. His face, partially hidden under a gray wool cap, bore the same unreadable expression. Riley looked up. Can we bring him something warm? Melissa sighed. Her body ached from the double shift she'd just finished, and the sting of cold air only deepened the fatigue in her bones. Sweetie, I wish we could help everyone who's struggling. But right now, we need to get home. I have another shift tonight. But Riley wasn't moving. She looked so much like Thomas in that moment, jaw tight, eyes stubborn, that it startled Melissa. Dad wouldn't walk past him, Riley whispered. The words landed like a stone in Melissa's chest. Thomas had always carried an unshakable belief in kindness, even when it cost him. That night, as rain tapped gently against their apartment windows, Riley disappeared into her room and returned with a shoebox. She opened it without a word, revealing a pair of well-kept work boots. Thomas's boots. The ones he hadn't worn the day he died. Melissa knelt down, touching the boots as if they were still warm. These were his favorite. I know, Riley said, her voice steady. But that man, his feet must be so cold. Melissa wanted to say no. She wanted to protect the last tangible piece of her husband. But Riley's eyes shimmered with something deeper than childhood curiosity. He has perfect shoes now, Riley whispered. He doesn't need these anymore. Melissa turned away, blinking fast. Let's bring them tomorrow. Together. The next afternoon, the city was shivering again. They walked quietly toward Washington Avenue, the shoebox wrapped in layers of newspaper. Riley held it close, like it was made of glass. When they reached the underpass, the man looked up. For a moment, his mask, grime, stubble, exhaustion, held. But Melissa noticed something. A hesitation. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. Excuse me, sir, Riley said, stepping forward. These were my dad's. She peeled back the newspaper gently, revealing the polished leather. But he passed away. And I think you need them more than we do. The man didn't speak. His hand trembled as he reached for the boots. For a split second, Melissa thought she saw something flicker across his face. Not gratitude. Not disbelief. Guilt. You don't have to say anything, Riley added. Dad always said, kindness is the only thing worth giving away without a receipt. Melissa placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, ready to move them along, when the man finally murmured, "Thank you." His voice was low, but it shook with something buried deep. They turned to leave, and Melissa dared one last glance back. He was staring at the boots in his lap like they were relics. His fingers brushed the laces with something close to reverence. That night, Melissa tucked Riley in and stood quietly by the doorway, watching her daughter drift into sleep. The boots were gone. The bridge was empty. But the next morning, Boston Memorial's internal bulletin announced a sudden change in leadership. Ethan Blackwood had assumed temporary directorship for the hospital's transition period. Melissa barely blinked at the news. She didn't read tabloids, didn't care much for CEOs or headlines. She had diapers to change and patients to calm. But across town, in a penthouse so high it seemed to scrape the edge of winter clouds, Ethan Blackwood sat at his desk, the boots placed beside a silver-framed photo of a woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. "Jess," he whispered to the photo. "I think I found her." The phone call came just as Melissa was rinsing out Riley's lunchbox. The number was blocked. She almost ignored it. "Ms. Morgan?" The voice on the other end was crisp, efficient, female. "My name is Charlotte Davis. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Ethan Blackwood. He's requested a meeting with you. At your convenience." Melissa nearly dropped the plastic container. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mr. Blackwood wishes to speak with you. Regarding your daughter. And her future." "Riley." Her heart climbed into her throat. "Is she all right?" "She's perfectly fine. But we believe she's more remarkable than even you may know." 3 hours later, Melissa sat across from Ethan again, this time in a private lounge on the 52nd floor of Blackwood Tower. There were no formalities. No assistants. Just him and her. And the boots, those damn boots, still there, resting beside his chair like an offering no one dared touch. "You've been watching us," Melissa said quietly, arms crossed, voice cold. "Yes," Ethan admitted, no excuses in his tone. "I wanted to know who raised a girl like that." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the moment she knelt before me in the rain and gave away the last piece of her father. That wasn't an invitation to invade our lives." "No," he agreed. "But it was a mirror. Of something I lost. Of who I used to be. My wife, Jessica, she was a pediatric oncologist. Brilliant. Stubborn. Obsessed with helping kids no one else saw. We started a foundation before she died. It was supposed to be her legacy. And you let it die with her?" Melissa asked, more harshly than she intended. "I buried it," he said. "Like I buried everything else that mattered." They stared at each other for a long moment, the city spinning silently beyond the window behind him. "I want to fund Riley's education," Ethan said finally. "Not because I pity you. But because I believe in her. I believe in the kind of person she might become." Melissa studied him. "And what do you want in return?" Ethan looked genuinely confused by the question. "Nothing. I'm not asking you to owe me. I just want to see it through." She didn't reply. But deep inside, something unsettled began to shift. Patricia Morgan arrived uninvited the following Sunday, sharp heels clicking across the linoleum of their cramped apartment. Her lipstick was perfect. Her tone, poisonous. "I know what he's doing," she snapped, arms folded, glaring across the kitchen at Melissa. "He's buying your daughter." "Patricia. You think this is just charity? No one gives something for nothing. He wants something. And he's using Riley to get it." Melissa's fingers clenched around a mug she hadn't realized she was holding. "Riley is not for sale." Patricia stepped closer, voice lowering to a hiss. "You've always been naive, Melissa. Thomas would have seen right through him. And there it was. The knife, straight to the heart. Don't you dare bring him into this," Melissa whispered, trembling. "Thomas would have been proud of Riley. Of how selfless she is. Of the life she's trying to build. She's 9. Patricia exploded. "She shouldn't be building anything. She should be safe. Protected from men like him." From the hallway, Riley's small voice interrupted. "He's not a bad man." They turned. She stood there barefoot in her pajamas, hugging the stuffed elephant her father gave her 2 birthdays ago. "I gave him something," she continued softly. "And he gave us something back. Isn't that what people are supposed to do?" Patricia didn't respond. But the next day, Child Protective Services showed up at Melissa's door. Melissa sat across from the caseworkers, the color drained from her face, trying to answer their questions without breaking. Yes, she worked full-time. Yes, she had accepted a scholarship. No, Mr. Blackwood had no personal access to her daughter beyond what the program required. She knew it had been Patricia. The timing, the words, the accusations, it was all too familiar. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" Melissa asked, her voice shaking. James Walsh, one of the CPS investigators, folded his hands on the table. "We're not making accusations. We're responding to a report that there may be inappropriate influence from a non-family adult in your child's life. Because a man gave my daughter a chance," she snapped. "Because someone with the power to change things actually did?" Walsh didn't answer. But Sarah, the second investigator, glanced toward Riley's bedroom and said gently, "We'll need to speak with her." Alone. Melissa could only nod. Powerless. Humiliated. That evening, a call came from a number Melissa didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. But something in her bones told her it wasn't over. "Ms. Morgan," Ethan's voice came through, tight and measured. "I've been informed about the visit from Child Services. I want you to know, my legal team is ready to help." Quietly. Fully. Without public spectacle. Melissa pressed her fingers against her temples. "This is spiraling. I know. But I think it's time I told you the truth." Her voice was barely audible. "What truth?" There was a pause on the line. "Then, the man Riley met under the bridge, wasn't the first person your husband's boots saved." It took Melissa a full minute to process what she'd just heard. "You knew Thomas," she whispered into the phone, her voice trembling. "Before. I met him a year before his accident," Ethan said. "He was overseeing construction on the pediatric wing at St. Germain's. We spoke during an inspection, just 2 working men making small talk. I was there in disguise. No bodyguards. No press." Melissa felt her knees give out and sank slowly onto the edge of Riley's bed. "He saw right through me," Ethan continued. "Said I walked like someone who didn't trust anyone. That people who build walls too high end up living alone inside them." Melissa closed her eyes, Thomas's voice rising in memory, steady, kind, unshakable. "He would say something like that. I didn't know his name at the time," Ethan said quietly. "But after Riley gave me those boots, I checked. The stitching. The initials inside. And I remembered." "You think this means something?" she asked. "I think it means everything," he replied. "Because I wasn't just a stranger to your daughter. I was the unfinished promise your husband made before he died, to make the world kinder, even if only in small ways." 3 days later, Melissa stood in the center of the courtroom, Riley clutching her hand. Across the aisle, Patricia's lawyer argued that Ethan's involvement was invasive, that Melissa was compromised, that the child was being leveraged in a high-stakes emotional exchange. But Judge Eleanor Martinez had sharp eyes and an even sharper instinct for truth. "Ms. Morgan," she said gently, "I'd like to hear from Riley directly. If you're willing." Riley stepped forward, her chin trembling, but her voice clear. "I gave Mr. Blackwood my dad's boots," she began. "Because they were warm. And because Dad always said that if you have 2 of something, you can share one." She paused, glancing briefly at her aunt. "He didn't buy me. He saw me. And he remembered." The judge smiled faintly. "Remembered what, Riley?" That kindness is supposed to go somewhere, Riley said. It's supposed to grow. The room was silent as Riley returned to her seat, small but somehow towering. Judge Martinez leaned back. Petition denied. Full custody remains with Ms. Morgan. The rain had just begun again when they returned home. It tapped gently against the windows like a memory. Melissa stood in the kitchen, staring at the envelope Ethan had sent earlier that day. Inside were documents, official, notarized, transferring her title to executive director of the newly established Shoes of Hope Foundation. A non-profit born from one child's gift and one man's broken vow. You'll build this, the letter read. The way your husband would have wanted. The way Riley already has. There was no signature. Just a single line beneath it. Everyone deserves warm feet. At the foundation's grand opening, Riley stood beside her mom in a navy blue dress, watching the crowd gather. Among them were nurses from the hospital, kids in scholarship uniforms, and a few quiet figures from Ethan's past, investors, colleagues, the rare few who had seen him before he disappeared into wealth. And then he arrived. No press. No fanfare. Just a man in a soft gray coat carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. For your husband, he told Melissa. And for the girl who reminded me I still had a soul. They stood together as the ribbon was cut. Behind the glass, in the foundation's main gallery, a pair of worn work boots sat in a display case under a single spotlight. The plaque beneath them read, "The First Step." That night, Riley curled up in bed with her favorite book, the window cracked just slightly to let in the whisper of spring. "Mom?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Dad knows?" Melissa paused, a lump rising in her throat. She sat down at the edge of the bed and brushed a strand of hair from Riley's forehead. "I think," she said softly, "he's been watching the whole time." Riley smiled. And somewhere in the city, in a room filled with shadows and memories, Ethan Blackwood stared at a framed photo of Jessica, then slowly placed a small model of a child's boot beside it. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Some promises don't need words, only someone brave enough to carry them forward.